Nice changeover by Kemba Walker.
Yeah, this is the Kemba Walker. Forgot he played on the Bobcats? Yeah, most of us do. He had the unfortunate luck of being drafted to the worst team in NBA history, the 2012 Bobcats, and that team was poverty. They only won a grand total of 7 games and a low loss total of 59. Pretty good season if you ask me. Funnily enough, the head coach of that team was Paul Silas, the father of the same Silas who's currently the tank commander of the Rockets. A little fact. But on that topic, I want to talk about poverty. No, not socioeconomic poverty, but poverty in sports. People love to always throw around the phrase that their team is poverty. Just look at Arizona Cardinal fans. As an Arizona resident, I can confidently say that team is trash. But what exactly makes that team poverty? Is it their win-loss record? Their players? What exactly quantifies an entire franchise as poverty? Well, using math and a ridiculous amount of paper, I figured that out and figured out who is the true poverty franchise in the NBA. Let's talk about it. Yo, what's up everybody? It's your boy 2KJ here, and today I want to get to the bottom of who is truly the most poverty franchise in 2023. People always love to say teams like the Kings and Knicks are poverty, but in reality, how bad are they? They have storied franchises and long histories, so I think it might surprise you. Now, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and post down there who you think is the most poverty franchise before you watch the video. See if you're right at the end. So, enough of that stuff. Let's get down to business. So, first things first, we define a way to define poverty. Obviously, there are a lot of different stats and aspects to a team we can use to define how much they suck, but let's just start off with the simple stuff for now. An easy way to quantify poverty is to see who has a championship and who doesn't. It's the eye test. We've done it for pretty much every sport, and it works on the surface level, but there's one major problem people don't think about to this method. Let's look at the Atlanta Hawks for a second. As one of the oldest franchises in league history, they have one banner to their name, which is pretty unsurprising. Now, this should put them in the non-poverty category by the eye test, but they won the championship back in 1958. Even worse, they haven't been back to the finals since 1961. This means that most Hawks fans have only seen the team go to the Eastern Conference Finals twice in their lifetimes, and that's in the past 10 years. So, where do we go from here? Where does this leave us with our poverty question? Does this mean that old championships shouldn't count? Does this mean that the Hawks are poverty? Well, maybe, but it just means we got to get a little more complex. Let me show you. These are the 7 quantifiers that will be used to create our poverty index. To start off, total wins, losses, and win-loss percentage are pretty obvious picks. This way, teams that are having more winning seasons than losing seasons are being rewarded. Next is finals appearances, championships, and playoff appearances. Championships are a no-brainer, but playoff appearances and final appearances are there to help give teams that string together successful seasons props for their hard work. Last is the most important quantifier of all. Going back to that Hawks example, I want to reward teams not only for the dominance of their past, but the success of their current teams as well. That way, teams that won chips in the age of the dinosaurs and haven't made it back won't be rewarded as much. And that quantifier is years since the team has been in the finals. So how do all these fit together in our formula? A bunch of trial and error that should look something like this. First things first, finals appearances times 3 are added to winning seasons and playoff appearances. These are all multiplied by total win-loss percentage, then multiplied in total by finals wins plus 1. Now the lower half of the formula. Finals appearances plus finals wins plus 1 are divided by the years since the team has been in the finals. This is all divided by games lost times 2 to give us our poverty index score. The higher the score, the less poverty. The lower the score, the more poverty. Now, let's get to the meat and bones, done with all the math stuff. Let's see who beats the allegations and who doesn't, because this first one might shock you. Let me show you. Now, before we figure out who the worst franchise is in the NBA, let's talk about who the best ones are. Running at the top 5, unsurprisingly, the Celtics and Lakers are 1 and 2, with the C's taking a staggering lead over everybody in the field. This makes a lot of sense, and I really shouldn't have to explain why. Only 2 teams with over 10 banners, both tied with 17, and both 2 of the most storied franchises in NBA history. Now, let's talk about 3, 4, and 5. The Warriors, Heat, and Spurs round out the rest, and this makes a lot of sense. The Warriors have the most recent dynasty and actually have the 3rd most finals wins of all time at 7. Now, the Heat being 4 is a bit of a surprise, but also makes a lot of sense. The Heat aren't that old of a franchise. only being around for 35 seasons and making the playoffs in 23 of them. Even more, they've been to the finals 6 times with 3 victories, and the most recent coming in 2020. All these facts help place them near the top and help their poverty score. For the Spurs, also a pretty obvious case. Longevity and dominance over the past 2 decades, and probably a little bit more, have made them one of the best and storied franchises in NBA history. Now, this is where things start to get really interesting. If you look at the middle of the pack, you can actually see that one team sort of doesn't belong here. All of these teams have championships with the exception of the Phoenix Suns. Now, how did this happen? Is there something wrong with the model? No, the Suns are actually just a good franchise. They've been around for 55 seasons, and in that time they made the playoffs 31 times and post a .535 winning percentage, which is actually the 5th highest of all time. Sealed the deal, they made the finals 2 years ago, helping their poverty index score rise. And even more, if you think about it, the real reason they haven't won a chip is because they got stopped by the Spurs dynasty and by Giannis. If they had those chips, they'd certainly be a lot higher by now. Now, let's talk about some of the rest of the teams and the impacts that rings can have on them. This can be easily shown in the Raptors case. As an expansion team, they haven't really been around for that long, but that championship helps catapult them into the middle of the pack. Now, same things with the Knicks and Nets, as they have old championships, but the Knicks are a more storied franchise, and the Nets have their ABA championships to back them up, which I decided to count since they are technically a part of the franchise's history. Not counting those, I'd certainly rank them a lot lower, which I will also put in this list as well. As you can see, there are 2 slots with the ABA and without the ABA. Now, some of these other teams, it also makes sense, with the Hawks and Wizards being so low because of their old championships and their non-recent success. Now, let's look at some of the other teams who haven't won chips. Magic, Jazz, Clippers, Kings, Nuggets are pretty much obvious, with the Nuggets really being only surprised, as their recent success would make you think that they're a lot better of a team. But this makes a lot of sense, as none of these teams have ever won a finals before. Now, the last 4 are a very interesting case. They actually all have something in common, which I found very, very interesting, and I want you to see if you can figure it out while I tell you what teams they are. So, starting from the top, going to the worst, Pelicans, Grizzlies, Charlotte, and last, but certainly least, the Timberwolves. Now, what do all of these teams have in common? You figured it out, they're expansion teams. They're all recent expansion teams as well. Now, Charlotte was around for a while, but they disappeared and then came back, and we know what they've been doing in their Bobcats time and with Michael Jordan running them. But what about the rest of these teams? Well, the Pelicans really haven't done much, and nor have the Grizzlies or Timberwolves. Timberwolves have got some pretty good runs to go, but they've been stopped short well more than a couple times. But why are all these teams the worst? Well, as expansion teams, sometimes it's hard to put together winning seasons, as you usually don't really get the best players, or the best coaches, or management staff, or pretty much any of that stuff. All of these teams have had their time, though, as being relatively successful, but not really being able to seal the deal. But these 4 teams being the worst make a lot of sense. Expansion teams are often pretty bad for a pretty long time. It's really hard for them to get their feet off the ground, and when they do, they've usually dug themselves a hole so deep it takes quite a while to get out of. But having even 1 chip to these names would make these teams a lot better. Look at that in the Raptors case. They're also an expansion team, but being one of the only with a chip to their name. Now, where does this leave us for our poverty conversation? Well, obviously the Timberwolves are the most poverty team. We can sort of see that here, but it's really interesting to see that teams with rings rank lower than some teams who don't have rings. And really it shows that longevity is the most important thing. While it's really important to have a ring, like in the Hawks and Wizards case, if your ring came 50 or 60 years ago, it's not going to hold the same weight as it does now. Look at the Nets. Look at where they are with their ABA rings and without their ABA rings. It matters a lot. And look at the Suns even, without a ring but still in the top 10 of poverty scores. It really shows that having a team that can succeed over decades and decades is more important than a team that succeeded once in the 50s or 60s when the NBA started and hasn't really done much since. But I think this is a really interesting chart. If you got anything you want to say about it, post it down in the comments. I'm going to be trying to refine it a little bit more. Maybe I'll get a backup video a couple weeks or months from now when I've sort of perfected the formula. But thank you guys for watching. And who do you think is the most poverty franchise in NBA history? Post it down in the comments, even if they are somewhere higher on the list. Who do you think is poverty? Post your reasons why. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good one. Take it easy. Peace.